See, the kids know I'm crazy. And I think this is important. I think that in order to be an effective parent, your kids have got to be a little scared of you.
Welcome back to our channel, you guys. I am Z, and this is my husband. Same
Charles.
name.
I'm Charles.
Yes. And we just want to let you guys know we are at 950 subscribers. We are so close to that 1,000 mark. So you know what you have to do. Remember to like and subscribe down below. And so today, Charles and I were cruising around. We're looking at the new house, and we were thinking about discipline. And when I say discipline, how do we go about disciplining our children? And how is that impacted by our culture, how we were brought up, and then even some of the difficulties with being a blended family in discipline. If you guys don't know, Charles and I, we have 3 kiddos, 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a fairly new 2-year-old. And the 2 older children, the 8 and the 7-year-old, they are my bonus children. I did adopt them, but I met them when they were 2 and 3. And I kind of had to learn, what my role was in their lives and how do I go about disciplining, how I discipline them. And so that was kind of a learning curve. But I think it's first important to start with what was our experience during our childhood as far as discipline goes. And maybe, Charles, I'll let you go first, and then I'll jump in with what my experience was as far as discipline.
Sure. So growing up, I didn't have a lot of discipline. My parents got divorced when I was young, when I was like 8 years old. And I ended up living with my dad for most of my childhood, from like 10 until I got out of the house at 18 or 19 or whatever that was. And he didn't really discipline me at all. How do
you think that affected you as far as?
Negatively. I went through a really difficult phase in my 20s where I made some bad choices. I didn't really have a good direction. I didn't have a lot of self-esteem, and I trace that back to not having a lot of guidance and not having a lot of discipline. Nobody setting a lot of boundaries for me. My dad did the best he could, but he always just tried to be first and foremost my friend. And that's not a good way to parent, is to just be a friend to your kid. You should be a friend to your kid, but also you have to tell your kid no. You have to tell them what the rules are for life, and you have to make sure that they if you don't do that, your kid doesn't know the rules,
right?
And they're gonna go flying off every which way trying to figure out what the rules are. And that was kind of me in my 20s, and I made a lot of wrong turns, and I attribute that back to a lack of discipline, a lack of rule setting in my childhood.
For me, I had a different experience. So I grew up, I'm a first-generation American. My family is from Jamaica, and I felt like, well, first and foremost, I think I was a pretty good child, right? So I didn't get a lot of spankings or beatings, but my parents had a tone, right? And I remember when I was 5 or 6 years old, I said something, and it wasn't even a real hard tap. I got a little tap of my hand, and I bawled my eyes out. And then ever since then, it was just a look. And I think when I got into my maybe preteens or teenage years, maybe once or twice, I maybe had a shoe thrown at me and I ducked. But I think my parents were really good as far as tone, and I really respected my parents. And that doesn't say they didn't believe in spankings. Like my older brother, he got a little bit more spankings than I did, but I never viewed it when they did, spank my brother, or the one time I got a hit, as any kind of abuse. Right? It was really a last option for them. I knew my boundaries with my parents. And I think overall, not saying that I made all the right choices, but I think I avoided some big blunders in life just because of the discipline, right? That they kind of enforced in that way. But Charles, I have a question for you. So tell me a little bit how your experience during childhood, how did that impact you or influence you in how you discipline our children now?
Without being critical, without being judgmental, I feel like my childhood, I have an example of how I don't want to parent. And so, sometimes you get an example and you're like, that's a good example, I'm going to follow that. Well, I feel like I had the non-example. And so me with my kids, I do the opposite. I'm not overly strict, but I make sure that our kids understand the rules. They understand what I expect. They understand what they are not to do, and they understand that there's consequences if they don't obey me, if they don't obey Z. And now we give our kids a pretty not a free rein, but we give our kids a lot of leash, a lot of leeway, but we do let them know specifically what is okay and what is not okay, and if they step out of line, then we do discipline them.
Give an example. How do you discipline?
So we're not hitters. I don't think our kids have really ever done anything.
Have you ever spanked the kiddos?
Yeah, when they were little kids. Mm-hmm. When they were little kids, I did give them a spanking like a couple of times, pop, pop. But since they've been, they're 8 and 7 now. In the last 3 years, I haven't spanked the kids. But
it's more so like a stern voice and taking away certain privileges. Okay.
See, the kids know I'm crazy. And I think this is important. I think that in order to be an effective parent, your kids have got to be a little scared of you.
Yes, and I think that comes with respect, right? Because, for example, kind of piggybacking off of that, my brother is grown, way into his 40s. But I think even when he's around my mother, there's a certain level of respect. Like when she says something to him, and my mom's in her 70s now. And so I just realize the morals that they, kind of embedded in us. And so how much, even now, as grown as we are, how we respect her. I think for me, as far as discipline goes, it was a learning curve. As I stated, when I met Charles, he already had my bonus babies. They were 2 and 3. And I was kind of quickly learning, I think, how to parent, right? Parenting on a whim. And I remember for our oldest kiddo, our little boy who's now 8, and he was maybe 3 or 4 at the time, he did something and I gave him a little pop like this. Oh, and he cried. And I remember Charles came to me, he's like, hey, I think you should really say sorry to...
Did I tell you that?
You did.
Are you sure?
To me. And I was like...
That doesn't sound like me.
Yeah, and he really, I think he really remembered that for a few months after that. And then I kind of had to realize my role as bonus mama, right? Or as a motherly figure, that yes, I was a motherly figure, but I was also a new person in their life. And so rather than me do the little tap, granted it was very, very light. I wasn't doing anything with, hard hits or bruising. I feel like that is abuse to children. I had to realize, with me being a new or having a new parental role in their lives, that it was better that I use my words, or if I felt like, we need a little bit more, I needed to communicate with daddy and come together as a team in regards to that. Now, don't get me wrong, when I get my tone down with all of our kiddos, they act right, okay? I think our kiddos are pretty good at a point now where we don't have to put hands. It's more so, taking away privileges. You won't have dessert, or you lose your tablet, or no TV, things like that. And they respond pretty well. And I think do. Overall, we have pretty good kids. Now, let me ask you, is there any way that, or do you think there's improvement or ways that we can improve with how we discipline the children?
No, I don't feel like there's anything wrong with the way we discipline the children right now. What do you think?
Yeah, with how we discipline, I don't. I think this is probably separate. I think we need to maybe start to give them more responsibilities.
Yeah.
Because I feel like at times, I try to encourage them to like make their bed, but it's just little things like, I'm sure a lot of you parents have been through this or going through this, leaving towels or leaving clothes on the floor. So I think just a little bit more responsibility. But discipline in itself, I think they listen, they're responsive, and we communicate. I feel talking to friends and growing up, I feel like the issue that certain individuals have as far as discipline goes is that lack of communication. So it's one thing to, take away something like a tablet or dessert, but I think it's important to explain why you are doing something. And I think I've learned it's important that you have them kind of verbalize,
Right.
communicate back to you what they did wrong and how they can do better. I think that's an important point. I don't know.
I completely agree, because you don't want kids to not understand why they're being punished, or else they're just going to think that you're unfair. And so you've got to make sure they understand the rules before, why they're being punished, what they could do better next time, when the punishment is going to end, and it's got to be fair. You can't punish one kid more than the other kid for the same thing. Kids have a very inherent sense of fairness.
They do, but they also need to understand that not everything is going to be quote unquote fair. Maybe that's the one thing I think I have to say when it comes to discipline, or someone getting going to a friend's house. And this is on a side note, I feel like you also at a certain point have to teach your kids that it's not always quote unquote fair. Right? Today maybe you get to go to your friend's house, you get an invitation, but maybe next weekend you're home, but your brother gets to go to a friend's place. And I'm sorry, you guys, we're cruising home and the sun is kind of, blasting.
Don't look directly at your screen.
But anyway, we can go on and on and on. I'm sure you guys probably have a lot of input about disciplining your children. What was your experience when you were a child? And what were some of the difficulties, or what was your experience as far as disciplining your little ones?
And especially if you went through the whole bonus mom thing.
Yes, being a blended family.
Yes.
As always, once again, you guys, we're so close to 1,000. Remember to like and subscribe down below. We'll talk to you guys later.